Hello, BookTube. It's Tuesday, and that means tags in our little corner of BookTube. And fortunately, I don't have to look far and wide for what tag I do on Tuesdays, as long as Jim at Jim's Books, Reading, and Stuff is doing his alphabet tag, and he is winding down his alphabet tag. He does a different letter every week, and we're up to the letter X. And I love these prompts, so we're just going to go through them. He starts off his tag, his X tag, with the beginning of Coleridge's poem. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alph the sacred river ran, through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. But then Jim stops, and I know what you people are like. So before I get to the prompts, I will read the whole of the poem to you. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alph the sacred river ran, through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. So twice 5 miles of fertile ground, with walls and towers were girdled round, and there were gardens bright with sinuous rills, where blossomed many an incense-bearing tree, and here were forests ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery. But oh, that deep romantic chasm which slanted down the green hill athwart a cedarn grove, a savage peace, as holy and enchanted as ere beneath a waning moon was haunted by woman wailing for her demon lover. And from this chasm with ceaseless turmoil seething, as if this earth in fast thick pants were breathing, a mighty fountain momently was forced. Amid those swift, half-intermittent bursts, huge fragments vaulted like rebounding hail, or chaffy grain beneath the thresher's flail, and mid these dancing rocks at once and ever it flung up momently the sacred river, 5 miles meandering with mazy motion, through a wood and dale and sacred river ran, then reached the caverns measureless to man, and sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. And mid this tumult Kubla heard from far ancestral voices prophesying war. The shadow of the dome of pleasure floated midway on the waves, where was heard the mingled measure of fountain and the caves. It was a miracle of rare device, a sunny pleasure dome with caves of ice. A damsel with a dulcimer in a vision I once saw. It was of an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Abora. Could I revive within me her symphony and song, to such delight 'twould win me, that with music loud and long I would build that dome in air, that sunny dome, those caves of ice, and all who heard should see me there, and all should cry, beware, beware. Weave a circle round him thrice, and close your eyes with holy dread, for he on honeydew hath fed, and drunk the milk of paradise. Just fantastic. You want it to go on forever. Maybe not in my reading, but you want the poem to go on forever. And while we're talking about Coleridge's Xanadu poem, I couldn't refrain from mentioning the great 1980 movie, Xanadu, starring Olivia Newton-John and Gene Kelly, with music by ELO at the peak of their considerable powers. I couldn't go without mentioning Xanadu, the movie. But then now we'll go on to the prompts. And prompt number 1 is X is for xylophone. What is your ringtone? And I would be happy to check what my ringtone is if I could find my phone. But one of the casualties of my cavalcade of guests here at Hyde Cottage, where suddenly I've become popular, so I've had a bunch of guests, and it's not over with yet. There have been casualties. One was my floor lamp, which died, but another is my phone. I cannot find my phone. It must have been, when you have guests over, you don't plan ahead of time every last detail of what space is going to be needed. So inevitably, when the food is broken out and the wine is broken out, people will move stuff around, and I will move stuff around. I am sure that's what happened, that at some point in some evening, Friday evening, someone moved that phone to a place where I cannot now find it. So I have no idea what my ringtone is. I don't have any idea. I don't remember. So I have to check it. And in order to do that, I have to find my phone, and I can't. So we'll just move on to X is for X-Files. Are you a Mulder or a Scully? Mulder believes in the paranormal and extraterrestrial, whereas Mulders or Scullys are skeptical and look for more rational explanations for strange phenomena. And I want to point out here that Fox Mulder also looked for rational explanations of the strange and phenomenal. He just believed that they were there. whereas Dana Scully often did not. And I myself would be far more skeptical. I would be far more on the Scully scale of things. Uh, let's see here. X is for Xenomorph, which is a famous alien from the movie franchise. Who or what is your favorite alien? Naturally, I'm thinking about Book Trek 2021, a 5-month mission I'm embarked on to read Star Trek fiction. Star Trek has a ton of great aliens, and some of you may think that my favorite would be the Trill, for reasons that may or may not be obvious. But no, it's Star Trek still, but it's the Klingons. I absolutely love the way the Klingons have been fleshed out. I'm not talking about the way they were betrayed and then traduced in Star Trek Discovery, but all the rest of Star Trek. I love the way they ended up being fleshed out. It was wonderful. You always know that a job like that has been done well when you'd be perfectly happy to watch a whole show just about the Klingons without having the Federation in it at all. So I'm going to say the Klingons in honor of Book Trek. Then X is for Malcolm X. Have you read his autobiography? And then in parentheses, Jim writes, obviously this is not addressed to Mr. Steve Donoghue. I'm sure will have read it. And that is true. I have read it. I've also taught it. The question goes on to say, did you learn anything from it? I learned the factual details of what was in it. I also learned a lot about the writing style, a little bit more about the writing style of Alex Haley, but I don't really know that I learned much more than that. I went into it knowing quite a bit on the subject of Malcolm X, and I've been very interested to see how later biographies of Malcolm X have used that book. But I don't know that I learned anything more than that, just the facts that it conveys. Then X is for Xmas. I absolutely hate this abbreviation. I just hate it. I always stop people when they do it. When they write to me, or especially when they talk to me and say Xmas, I always say, oh, do you mean Christmas? That drives me nuts. There's no rationale for it that I've ever heard that's even halfway good. But X is for Xmas. What is your favorite Xmas book? And Jim mentions in his video that, of course, it's A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. But I have something more specific. Just recently, I found a beautiful big annotated edition of A Christmas Carol that I have been loving. I explored it the day that I found it, and I've gone back to it a few times since. It made it into the little book room. So that I think it was Liverite, the annotated Christmas Carol. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Don't want any other version now. Then X is for X-Ray Spex, the famous English punk band. What is your favorite punk band? I don't have a favorite punk band. I don't like punk music. Then X is for Xenocide. Is there a book you have read which covered a Xenocide? I don't know if covered is the right word, but the first book that came to mind is a science fiction novel I read probably 10 years ago by Ben Jeeps called The Xenocide Mission, that I really liked. I really wish, I used to have a copy of that here, a hardcover copy. I really wish I still did. I would gladly revisit it. But I haven't. I haven't seen it either. I don't. The Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, a really great used bookstore that I go to all the time, their weak spot is science fiction. So I don't see a lot of science fiction there. And the Xenocide Mission has never returned. So I don't have my original copy. So, but I liked it. I remember liking it. I wonder how it would stand up over time. Then X is for X certificate. What is the first adult film you saw? I had to rack my brains about this, but it was a porno movie called The Adventures of Busty Brown. And I was excited to see it, but it was deadly dull. Just incredibly boring. And no shocker at all. I wasn't like the other furtive kids in the audience who lied to get in there and had no idea what they were going to see. If you're around animals, then, the details of fornication not only aren't mysterious to you, but they also aren't sordid or illicit to you. They're just natural. I found it boring. Then, what was the first book you read which you consider unsuitable for children? That's easy. I read The Lord Won't Mind by Gordon Merritt, which is suitable for all audiences for about 15 pages. And then all of a sudden it is not anymore suitable for all audiences. Then X is for X Marks the Spot. Have you read a book about buried treasure? I've read many, many books about buried treasure, but the one that came to my mind is one that I would like to find again. I had a mass market paperback of it a long time ago, and I would love to find it. It's by Irving Stone, who I think is great. He did The Agony and the Ecstasy. I think The Agony and the Ecstasy is the only thing of his that's still in bookstores, or maybe Lust for Life. But he did a book called The Greek Treasure about Heinrich Schliemann, about the excavation of the gold of Troy. And it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I wish I still had my mass market copy of that book. I would gladly love to reread it. Then X is for X-Men. Do you have a favorite character in the X-Men? I want to split here between comics and movies. In the comics, my favorite character in the X-Men was Warren Worthington III, the Angel, from the original team of Teenage X-Men. Before he was mutilated and before he was transformed and before he became Archangel or whatever and gone through all the permutations that he's gone through. I mean the original character, the original version of Angel, who was a wealthy, good-looking teenage boy who had big wings growing out of his shoulders that allowed him to fly. And all the adaptations of his body as a result of that are detailed in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, the deluxe edition, which, just to update you, I still don't have. It was made into a hardcover omnibus volume, and I still don't have that volume, even though I know I would use it all the time. I know I would. That is a book that goes in the little book room. I just haven't done it. I spent 30 years hoping that somebody would do a full-color hardcover reprint of those volumes. Somebody did, and I still haven't got it. But in that book, we're told that Warren Worthington III's eyes are different. His eyesight is much better. The liquid in his eyes is much more viscous. We're taught that his bones are mostly hollow. We're taught all about his lung development that allows him to fly at high altitudes for long periods of time. Just wonderful. Just wonderful. I loved reading about that. But I loved it anyway. I always thought when I was reading the original X-Men, 60 years ago, when I was reading the original X-Men, I always thought these kids are misused. This is Stan Lee not caring about his stories. He's got lots and lots of deadlines. This is obviously the last thing in any week that he writes. And he's not paying any attention to how you could use these kids. They're so bad in combat. And they're being trained to use their powers. So you'd think they'd be better at it. And I especially thought that about Angel. Especially I did. If your Warren Worthington III and your superpower is that you can flap your wings and fly, then what's the best weapon that you want to have? You obviously want to have a weapon. I don't know why characters like Angel, who don't have much in the way of offensive capability, don't just carry a weapon, a laser rifle or something like that, or many of them. I have no idea why that is. But even if you don't do that, what's your foremost weapon? It's your feet, of course. Your superhero costume would involve extremely armored boots, because you would be dive bombing the bad guys, and yet that never happened. Instead, Angel, you never know what he's doing. When there's an X-Men fight scene in a comic book, the Beast will be slugging someone, and you'll see Cyclops' beams bouncing off someone, and Angel just sort of be flying around. You have no idea what he's doing. but in the movies, in the X-Men movies, my favorite character is Kelsey Grammer's version of Hank McCoy, the Beast. Really, really liked it. Could easily have stood to see a whole movie of just that character. Just thought it was tremendous. Really, I'm a Kelsey Grammer fan anyway, but I didn't think you could do that with that character, especially the way he's written. I'll never forget. I was in the movie theaters. I was watching the X-Men movie where they're dealing with this little boy who emits a field that cancels all mutations that's anywhere around him, and Hank McCoy reaches out to him, and the blue fur that covers his hand goes away. The closer it gets, his mutation cancels itself, and the look, it's amazing what Kelsey Grammer could do, even through layers and layers of makeup. The look of fascination and also wistfulness, just wonderful. Just wonderful. So I'm going to say those two, Angel and Beast. Then X is for Xylopyrography, the art of burning an image into wood. I don't think I have any examples of that. If I do, I don't know that they are. Then X is for Xenophobia. Have you been shocked by any xenophobia you have encountered in your reading? Here I might remind everybody that I spent a year reading every Trump book. And Donald Trump is about as xenophobic as a human being can get, so I encountered it quite a bit. Yes, it was always shocking. Then X is for X Factor. Do you have a hidden talent? I'd be willing to bet that at 5 videos a day for 5,000 videos, there's probably nothing about me that's hidden. What would my hidden talent be? I have no idea. You already know all my talents. I read really fast. I retain what I read really well. I write really fast. I I like to think I have a penchant for making people here in this room feel welcome. I'm very, very good with dogs. I have a very strong knack for canines of any kind, not just domesticated dogs. We counted that just the other day. Frida and I were walking in the lower part of the Arboretum, and we were getting ready to start going up, to start going up into the wooded uplands, and we were on a path still. We like to leave paths as soon as possible. We were on a path still, and we saw some people coming towards us. Frida jumped up and greeted them. She loves meeting strangers. And they said, that they'd heard from someone else that up further up was there is a pair of coyotes that are known to live in this area of the Arboretum. And from what people have told me, they're a particular strain of coyote that are bigger. They easily overlap with the lower end of the size scale of a wolf, and are fairly bold because they have no competition in this part of the Arboretum. And this couple said, just wanted to let you know that the people we talked to said that they think that one of those coyotes is out and about even during the day, even now. So you might want to watch out because, your little dog would be a nice tempting snack. And I nodded and said, oh, all right, thanks for the tip. But inside I was smiling because that is no danger. There is no danger of that happening whatsoever. But aside from that, what other hidden talent would I have? I don't think I have anything. I don't think there's anything hidden about me. And then we move on to bonus prompts, which I expect you all to do. And the first one is X is for Xena, the warrior princess. The prompt is, tell me about a female protagonist who kicked ass. And I don't want to stray from Xena, from Lucy Lawless's performance as Xena, which I think is tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. I loved that show when it was airing. I loved it to distraction. Even before the writers started to do all sorts of really interesting things in that show. Like having ancient Greek chapter titles in one video. Or the great episode where we learn just offhandedly that Xena is illiterate. She's never learned how to read. She just doesn't know how to read. And we learn it because her friend Gabrielle can read and is very intellectual, but Gabrielle wasn't around, and Xena had to go, and there were no palm fronds around, so she used a page out of one of Gabrielle's books. Just fantastic. Absolutely loved it. It never stops boiling my blood how the showrunners of Xena the Warrior Princess ended that show. Never ceases to boil my blood. Every time I have a fond memory about the show, I remember how it ended. With Xena defeated, stripped, and hung up like meat in the camp of her 2-bit enemies. Just horrifying. Just not the kind of... Obviously, if you have a show that is beloved by little girls all over the world, looking up to Xena, the Warrior Princess, if you have a show like that, especially a show that's so much fun, watch an old episode of Xena, the Warrior Princess. Lucy Lawless is having the time of her life, hamming it up as Xena. And also, when you watch old episodes of the show, you will notice something, which is that Xena kills a whole lot of people. Her preferred response to any kind of resistance at all is to kill the person involved. It's the closest thing that television has ever come to a faithful Conan the Barbarian. There was actually a live-action show called Conan, in which, to the best of my knowledge, because of Saturday morning cartoon rules, Conan never kills anyone. Xena kills all sorts of people all the time. It's one of her favorite things to do. But considering how much little girls love that show and idolize Xena, and considering what fun Lucy Lawless was having, obviously you end Xena the Warrior Princess by saying that the adventure goes on. That Xena is still out there, fighting people, having adventures, all that sort of thing. But that's not how the show ends. The show ends on a bitter, sordid, grainy, gritty, gross note. And it never stops bothering me. I wish that it weren't true. There's all sorts of, afterworld shenanigans. But in the real world, the rest of the world doesn't know about those afterworld, those fantasy world shenanigans. The real world only knows that this fantastic warrior, Xena, was eventually beaten, killed, stripped, and strung up. And that is not how Hercules ends, for instance. It just bothers me. But I'm going to stick with that. And I also want to recommend My Life is Murder. Lucy Lawless is, of course, still going on. She's great in everything she does. And she's in a show right now called My Life is Murder. I have a screener of a few episodes, and they are terrific. It's sort of a comedic cop show. And it's really, really good. And she's terrific in it, I swear. Never a missed beat. Never. So I'm going to stick with Xena for that. Then X is for Xian, Xanthi, Xanadu, and a few other places. Have you read anything set in a place beginning with X? I naturally thought of Piers Anthony, of the Xanth novels, where the fantasy map at the beginning of the Xanth novels makes it pretty clear that it's Florida. but the Xanth novels they're mighty whimsical, way too whimsical for my taste. But I got the first few because of how beautiful the covers were. Oh my God. Dragon on a Pedestal. And if you remember what the original mass market paperback cover of Dragon on a Pedestal looked like, it was incredible. Or the very first one, A Spell for Chameleon. The very first cover of the first Xanth novel is a work of art. I'd put a frame around it and put it on a wall if I had it that big. The books don't have enough meat on their bones. They're a little too Terry Pratchett for me, but naturally I thought of Xanth for this. Then X is for X-Ray. Have you broken any bones? I have not. Close, but not a full break, no. And finally, X is for Xerox. Have you read a book which plagiarized another book? I have. Yes. I have, many times. And a couple of times over the decades. The book that I read that plagiarized another book was the draft of a book that the book's author had given to me to read. Talk about an awkward situation where they're saying, here, I'm giving you this box, or in the present day, I'm giving you this file. If you've got the time, I'd really like, I have levels of reader response that I offer to people. One is just to read it as just an ordinary civilian, as I always put it. I'll read your book. I won't touch it at all. I'll just read it and give you my visceral reactions. Did it hold my attention? Was it vivid? Did it bore me? That sort of thing. The second is I'll give you, light textual criticism. This chapter goes on too long. This character is not emphasized enough for their importance in the plot, that sort of thing. But the third thing that I offer is line edits, where I will go through your manuscript with a fine-tooth comb. I will give you a closer edit than your editor does, the editor you end up paying. I give it a closer look than that. I try to make those bold-faced line edits entertaining because they can be brutal. And the one time a friend gave me a manuscript and actually asked me for that third level, fine grain line edits on this piece. I'd really like you to work it over, was his term. And there was a chunk. I was probably 100 pages in. There was a chunk that immediately set up all sorts of bells for me. I thought, this is a work of nonfiction. And I got to that chunk and thought, this isn't just close. This is the same thing. And I had the book on my shelf. I had the book in question. So I went and found it, just held it next to that, side by side. That was pretty awkward. I emailed, because that's not, if it's a phrase, well, okay, if you read the book a year ago and you have that kind of a writer's brain, then maybe the phrase is sticking in your head. But if it's page after page, word for word, that's intentional. And I had to get back in touch with my friend and say, well, I'm 112 pages in, and you're stealing here. And, that puts me in a horribly awkward situation, because this particular time I had the book you're stealing from. I have no idea if the rest of the book is stolen as well. And since you didn't tell me ahead of time, and you had to have known you were doing this, I can't exactly trust you to tell me that nothing else in the book is stolen. But it's worse than that, because even if you say, well, okay, you think I'm plagiarizing, I think it's no big deal, it was kind of fair usage or anything like that. My friend didn't do that. To his credit, he didn't do that. He was abashed. But even if you tell me that, I am still duty-bound to talk to your publisher. It's a horrible, horrible situation, and I've had that happen. I had to contact that guy. Once that friend got a publisher for his work, he said, I'll redo that section. He sent me he gave me a manuscript without that section. And I gave the rest of it line edits and said, okay, well, here's the strengths and weaknesses of this and this and this. And he said, so we're cool. Yeah. And I said, yeah, we're cool. But as soon as I know that your book has landed with a publisher, I'm going to send them a letter saying you had better have your legal team go over this with a fine-tooth comb, because the first draft had extensive plagiarism. He wasn't happy with that. But what can I do? What am I supposed to do? My primary loyalty is to you. I don't want you reading something plagiarized that gets by everybody else, if I know that danger is there. So yes, I have read read books that were plagiarized. I've also read books that were plagiarized where the author, I didn't know them, and they got the book to market. And I had to just point it out in a review. That's also very awkward. Anyway, that is the X tag. We move on from here. Only a few more alphabet tags to go. These are a lot of fun, though, so I'm hoping that you all do it. I don't know everybody. I don't know anybody that's all the way to X. I think I might be ahead of the crowd here, but I'm going to wrap this up for now for Tag Tuesday, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.